Deleted Peppa Pig episode Daddy Pig is Not Himself, which was never showed on TV. One morning, Peppa notices something strange. Daddy Pig is sitting at the table, too quietly. He isn't laughing, he isn't telling jokes, he isn't rustling his newspaper. Mummy Pig says, "Let him rest, he's tired." But Peppa notices. Daddy isn't blinking. He doesn't even move. At night, Peppa hears whispering in the hallway. She peeks out of her room and sees Daddy Pig standing in front of the mirror. His reflection is facing the wrong way. The next morning, everything seems normal again. Daddy Pig is smiling, eating breakfast. But when Peppa looks closer, she notices. His smile doesn't change, and it's unsettling. In the evening, the whole family sits in front of the TV. Suddenly, Daddy Pig turns off the lights, and in the darkness, his voice is heard, but not from his mouth. It comes from somewhere above them. "You've been looking at me for too long. Now, I'm looking at you." Final scene. Peppa wakes up at night. Her room is dark. From under the bed, a large figure slowly emerges, with the same smile as Daddy Pig. "Little Peppa," it whispers, "you're next." Deleted Peppa Pig episode The Room of Forgotten Toys, which was never showed on TV. One cloudy day, Peppa finds a strange door to the attic in their house. She had never noticed it before. Daddy Pig says, "Oh, it's just a storage room for old things." But when Peppa opens the door, she discovers a small room filled with old toys, dolls without eyes, balls with no patterns, wooden toy cars, all of them dusty and forgotten. On the floor sits a box with a sign, "Toys that were never claimed." Peppa feels a strange urge to stay there. The toys seem to be watching her. They don't move, but the longer she looks, the closer they seem. From deep within the room, a quiet child's voice whispers, "Play with us, Peppa. We missed you." When Peppa tries to leave, the door won't open. One of the dolls slowly turns its head. A message appears on the wall. "You are one of us now." Final scene. Peppa wakes up. It was just a dream, she thinks to herself. But then she notices, among her usual toys, there is now an old dusty doll wearing a pink dress and a familiar little ponytail on its head. The doll smiles, its eyes slowly open. "We found you," it whispers in the darkness. Deleted Peppa Pig episode George's Notebook, which was never showed on TV. The episode starts with no theme song. The camera slowly moves through a dark room. On the table lies an old notebook. The cover is dirty, as if it's been trampled in the mud. The title is scribbled in a child's handwriting. "George, my dinosaurs." George appears in the frame. He isn't smiling. He sits at the table and opens the notebook. Inside are dinosaur drawings, but they're getting darker and darker. One has wolf-like fangs. Another is covered in blood-red stains. Some pages have claw marks, like something scratched the paper from the inside. The sound of the pencil becomes too loud, like it's scratching not paper, but bone. Peppa enters the room. "What are you drawing, George?" He doesn't answer. He just keeps drawing. Peppa comes closer and looks at the notebook. There, it's her face, but the eyes are empty. Below the drawing, a note reads, "She will become a dinosaur too." The same drawings start appearing on the walls, one after another. Peppa screams, "Mummy!" Mummy Pig enters, but her eyes are gone. She speaks in a voice that isn't hers. He just wants you to play. The final shot, an empty room, only the notebook on the floor. The camera zooms in on it. The last page is blank, but at the bottom there's a message. Who's next? The screen goes black, and the sound of the pencil continues for several seconds in the darkness. Deleted Peppa Pig, episode Rainy Day Window, which was never showed on TV. The episode starts with the usual theme tune, but it sounds a bit muffled, like it's being played through an old tape. Peppa appears. It's raining today. George and I will play inside. The camera slowly zooms in on the window. Outside, the rain falls in a continuous sheet. George stands at the window. He doesn't move. Peppa calls out to him, "George, come play." But he doesn't respond. He just stares out the window. The camera gets closer to his face, and his reflection doesn't match. George turns his head. The reflection stays in place and smiles. Later, Peppa tells Mummy Pig that George is acting strange, but Mummy doesn't react. She just keeps washing dishes. The sound of the water gets louder and louder until it drowns out everything else. Then, at one moment, she turns around. Her eyes are completely black, and in a low voice she says, "The rain won't stop." The scene suddenly shifts. It's night. Peppa wakes up from her bed. Now it's raining inside the room. The walls are wet. The floor is covered in puddles. George is sitting in a corner. He's completely gray, as if the rain washed the color out of him. His voice trembles. He came from the window. The room starts stretching like it's made of rubber. Voices, many George, begin whispering, "Look at yourself." Peppa looks in the mirror. Her face now has George's wide smile. The mouth is too large. The eyes are empty. The final shot, the camera pulls back. Peppa's house stands alone in black void. The rain pours inside. Behind each window, a gray George, and in each window, a different version of events. Then the screen goes black. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Reflection, which was never showed on TV. It began like any ordinary day. Peppa was in the bathroom, brushing her teeth. The usual cheerful music played, but it felt slower, off-key. She looked up, and her reflection didn't smile. It just stared. Its eyes were darker, expression blank, motionless. Throughout the day, things got stranger. When Peppa moved, her reflection lagged behind. Sometimes it moved before she did. At dinner, she glanced toward the window, and there it was again. Her reflection just standing there, staring at her from the glass. She wasn't even near it. She told Mummy Pig, but Mummy didn't look up from her plate. She simply muttered,
"Don't look too long, Peppa. You might see too much."
That night, Peppa heard whispers coming from the bathroom, faint, garbled, like they were coming from behind the mirror. She crept inside and froze. Her reflection was grinning, an unnaturally wide, stretched smile. Then it moved, fast, slamming its hooves against the glass. Cracks started to form. The screen glitched. For a moment, everything went black. When the picture returned, it was morning. Mummy Pig walked into the bathroom. Peppa stood by the sink, brushing her teeth like nothing ever happened. But just before the scene faded out, the mirror showed two Peppias. One brushing her teeth, and the other behind the cracks, still grinning. The episode ended with no credits. Just a silent black screen. Deleted Peppa Pig, episode Peppa and the Black Mirror, which was never showed on TV. One day, while tidying up an old box under the stairs, Peppa found a strange object. A small handheld mirror with a crack in the corner and a curved inscription on the frame. "Look only in the dark." Hee, what nonsense, Peppa giggled and slipped the mirror into her pocket. That night she couldn't sleep. Everyone else was asleep, but she lay in bed, turning the mirror over in her hooves. The room was dark. Peppa lifted the mirror to her face and froze. In the reflection, she didn't see herself. The one in the mirror looked similar, but had empty eyes, no pupils, a stretched-out face, and the arms were much longer. Peppa screamed and threw the mirror. It flew into the corner of the room and cracked even more. Since then, things in the house started to feel strange. In the morning, Mummy Pig found a note by the door. "You let me in." That night, the mirror was back on the nightstand. Peppa tried to throw it away, but it always returned. One morning, Daddy Pig walked into the room and saw Peppa at the mirror. She was standing still, whispering to the reflection. "Peppa, who are you talking to?" he asked. Peppa turned around, but her lips weren't moving. They moved only in the reflection. Deleted Peppa Pig episode Peppa, Susie, George, and the Abandoned House, which was never showed on TV. One cloudy afternoon, Peppa, George, and Susie went out for a walk. "I heard there's an abandoned house over the hill," said Susie. "Nobody goes there. They say someone lives inside." "Nonsense," snorted Peppa. "Let's go, we'll just take a peek." George followed behind, clutching his toy dinosaur tightly. The house was indeed strange. The roof was broken, the windows boarded up, but the door was slightly open. "Just a quick look and we leave," Peppa whispered. Inside, it smelled of dust. The floorboards creaked under their hooves. In the corner stood an old mirror, and in it, something moved. "Look," Peppa pointed. "There's someone in the mirror." But the room was empty. It was just the three of them. And suddenly, a hand reached out from the mirror, translucent like mist. I stayed. "And you will stay, too," Peppa screamed. They grabbed each other and tried to run, but suddenly they heard someone crying. "Peppa," said Susie, "we need to leave, right now." But Peppa stopped. "Did you hear that?" They moved forward, step by step, until they reached a half-open door to a room that hadn't been there before. Inside, in the corner, someone was sitting on the floor. A figure with familiar glasses, a yellow shirt, brown fur. Pedro. He was hugging his knees and rocking back and forth, crying loudly. Pedro. Peppa took a step forward. The figure lifted its head. The face. It was almost like Pedro's. I tried to leave," he rasped. "But she won't let me." "Who?" "The one from the mirror. She's all of us now." And from behind his back, a ghostly figure emerged. And deleted Peppa Pig episode Scribbles, which was never showed on TV. One day at school, Madame Gazelle handed out new notebooks to the children. "You can draw anything you like in them," she said. "Just take care of them. These notebooks are special." Peppa got an old, worn-out notebook. On the last page, someone had scratched, "Do not erase. Do not draw jokes." Peppa just giggled. What nonsense. That evening at home, Peppa decided to test it. She drew a bunch of money, and within seconds, real bills appeared on the table, exactly like in the drawing. "Wow," Peppa froze. "It's a magic notebook." She hid it under her bed and went out the next day to play with Susie. At home, George stayed behind. He didn't know about the magic. He just wanted to draw. He opened Peppa's notebook and drew a funny, round head thing. He, George laughed. The head thing came to eat our heads. He forgot all about the drawing, but that night, Peppa woke up to a sound, scraping, footsteps. From the darkness emerged a figure. It was the head thing, just like in the drawing, only it wasn't laughing. It was hissing. Shh, here I come. Shh, who drew me? I eat. On a fresh page, someone had drawn Peppa with a cross over her face. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Mannequin in the Pig Family's House, which was never showed on TV. One day, Peppa and her mummy went to an antique shop. Mummy Pig wanted to buy a new armchair while Peppa was looking at strange things. Among them stood a tall, dusty mannequin. It had no face, just a smooth white surface. "Mummy, look, this one is funny," said Peppa. "Ugh, it's creepy." Mummy Pig snorted, but the shopkeeper, a thin old man with empty eyes, suddenly said, "Take it, it shows your home." Mummy Pig laughed, but somehow the mannequin ended up in their car trunk. Evening, the mannequin was placed in the corner of Peppa's bedroom, covered with the sheet. That night, Peppa woke up to a creaking sound. Her bedroom door was slightly open. She looked over and gasped. The mannequin was now standing at her door, without the sheet. "Mummy," she whispered. No answer, only the creaking, and then it smiled. Peppa screamed. Daddy Pig ran in and said she must have imagined it, but every night it was closer. Peppa realized it moves when no one's watching. It waits until everyone is asleep. One night, the mannequin disappeared. In its place stood a new figure. It was pink. It had a tiny snout and Peppa's dress. And the real Peppa was never seen again. Mummy Pig strokes the new doll and says, "You're such a good, obedient girl." And the mannequin now stands in George's room, waiting. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Ceiling Virus, which was never showed on TV. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more interesting videos. It started with a cough. First Daddy Pig, then Mummy Pig. They told Peppa it was just a cold and warned her not to leave her room at night. But Peppa didn't sleep. She heard rustling and creaking from above. Not the attic, the ceiling. One night she opened her eyes and saw Mummy, but not standing. She was crawling along the ceiling, slowly, head down. Her hands clung to the plaster like spider legs. Daddy Pig followed behind her. Their eyes were white, their mouths slightly open, but they were silent. Only the scratching of their feet above. "Peppa, are you awake?" whispered Mummy, without moving her lips. Peppa pretended to sleep. In the morning, everything seemed normal, but the parents didn't eat, didn't blink, didn't laugh. And at night, they crawled again. Peppa found an old newspaper in the attic. Unknown virus turns the infected into night crawlers. Their bodies change. They hunt by sound. The last line was circled in red. "Never open your eyes if you hear movement above, even if it's your parents' voice." Now Peppa doesn't sleep. She hears something dripping from the ceiling and whispering, "You're next, Peppa." Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Last Frequency, which was never showed on TV. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more interesting videos. At work, Daddy Pig was given a strange gift, a radio receiver covered in cracks. Old but stylish, Daddy Pig exclaimed happily. We'll listen to it in the evenings. That evening, the radio picked up only static, but exactly at 3:33 a.m., it came to life on its own. In the silence of the bedroom, a voice was heard, quiet, scraping.
Time to tune in. Time to tune in.
Daddy Pig got up first, then Mummy, then the children. They walked barefoot, heading toward the forest. In the clearing stood an old radio transmitter, rusty with wires sticking out like roots. Around it circled others, just like Daddy Pig, but not him. Strangers. And there, behind the trees, he was waiting. Slender Man. He just stood there. But the radio inside each of them was already receiving the signal. Peppa tried to cover her ears, and for the first time noticed black liquid was dripping from them. The signal was inside. Turn off the radio, she whispered to herself. Daddy, please. Daddy Pig, as if hearing through the haze, struck the radio. It cracked, and everything disappeared. In the morning, the radio lay broken. No one remembered anything. But Peppa knows for sure, if the radio is ever turned on again, the frequency will find them. And so will Slender Man. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, Daddy's Jealousy, which was never showed on TV. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more interesting videos. One morning, Peppa woke up to shouting in the kitchen. Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig were arguing loudly. You were with Rabbit again, yelled Daddy Pig. Every day. The garden. And what about me? He was just helping with the carrots, Mummy Pig answered softly. Daddy Pig didn't believe her. His round face turned red with jealousy. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in his chair, staring into the darkness, his face calm, his eyes unblinking. The next morning, he left. He told the family he was going to the city. But in truth, he went to see his close friend, the head of the wolves. Everyone had heard of him, of his power, of how he rarely left his house. Daddy Pig handed him a photograph of Mr. Rabbit. He's too close to my wife, Daddy Pig whispered. Make him disappear. That very night, Mr. Rabbit didn't return home. Peppa noticed that Mummy Pig cried more and more often in the bathroom. Where's Mr. Rabbit, Mummy? She asked one day. He left for good, and Daddy Pig smiled, wide, silent. He was calm again, too calm. But one night, there was a knock at the window. It was 3 a.m. On the porch stood the head wolf. You didn't tell me he was my friend, he said, staring Daddy Pig in the eyes. You didn't tell me he fed my pack. Then the house went dark. The next morning, it was empty. Just scratches on the walls and tufts of gray fur by the door.